What did a crush do that made you immediately lose interest? Story 1. I was casually dating a 19-year-old guy when I was 18. He seemed totally normal until I met him at his house before a date, and his mom asked him to take the garbage out before we left. He threw a fit that would embarrass most 3-year-olds, including crying, yelling at his mom, and punching the floor. I pretended that my parents were calling and needed me to come home, blocked his number, and never saw him again. I like to think that mom knew he'd do that and was trying to save you the trouble. Story 2. Not so much a crush, but we were in the initial sentences of the conversation of getting to know each other. We were describing to one another what our jobs were. He corrected me on describing my job, stopped right there, said it wasn't going to work out, and ended the conversation. Story 3. He would ask me questions about myself, then cut me off in the middle of my answer to talk about himself. Story 4. Back in college, I was seeing a girl casually. Whenever we text, she'd take hours to respond to any message. It wasn't a big deal, since most of the time I was just chatting or setting plans for the following weekend or something. It was a little annoying because it'd take a full day or two to set up plans because of the slow responses, but whatever. I'm a bad texter, so I can't really judge someone for that. But I started to notice that when we hung out together, she'd immediately respond back to any and every text she got. She had some loud song as a ringtone that played for like 15 seconds and set it so that her camera LED would flash constantly while it rang. Totally obnoxious and made me really notice how often she texted. I casually asked her who she was texting one time, and it was just some friend from school that had sent her a meme. After that, I realized it wasn't going to work. Being a slow texter is fine. Constantly texting while hanging out was annoying, but not a deal breaker, especially if we were just chilling at one of our houses. But the realization that this person who was glued to her phone but didn't feel like it was a priority to respond back to my texts made me feel unimportant, so I kinda just drifted away. We stayed friends because we shared the same group of friends, and it wasn't awkward or anything. We just stopped trying to do things with just the two of us. I had a best friend that was just like this, and he constantly claimed he just didn't text much or was a bad texter, but constantly on his phone texting and doing whatnot whenever we would hang out. Like, you're clearly just fine at texting, you just didn't want to text me. There were a number of things that ended our friendship, but eventually what ended it was me just giving up on trying to communicate with him. Story 5. Met a woman. Thought she seemed cool. We went out to eat. She's telling me about how she fell on financial hard times and moved back in with her parents. The way she described it just sounded like she got unlucky, not that she did anything irresponsible. It happens. When the bill came, I told her I'd pay. She said, "Thanks, I appreciate that. I'm trying to save my money right now." Me? Sure, I understand. You want to get your own place again. Her. No, I actually mean I'm trying to save up $500 for a tattoo I want to get. I've got nothing against spending money on tattoos, but when you've just spent a first date talking about financial troubles you have, maybe now's the time to start putting money away for necessities, not tattoos. Story 6. Had a few dates with a guy who I had spoken to for a couple of weeks and got to know. On the second or third date, he sprung on me that he is 10,000 pounds in debt because he has an addiction to buying novelty Rubik's Cubes and on-sale clothes on websites that use pressure tactics to sell you more stuff. They increase the price of an item every week. Then like 5 minutes later, he went on to that clothing website and spent more money he didn't have. Story 7. After my divorce, I reconnected with a girl I had a huge crush on in high school, after meeting up in Vegas and hooking up for a few nights, then going back to visit and doing the same again. Found out she lived with her boyfriend. No clue she had a boyfriend. It was messed up. Immediately lost interest. Story 8. Said she would turn up on a date, then flaked. Told me she had been called into work urgently. I said, okay, that's cool. Second time, she flaked again. Said she had to tutor someone, which made no sense because would you not have that planned? Story 9. She told me her future plans to essentially become a gold digger like her mother. When I laughed it off, she couldn't see what I thought was so funny. Story 10. I ran into an old crush a few years back who told me he was into dog baiting. The candle had already blown out a long time ago as far as my crush was concerned, but that pretty much killed any intention I had of trying to restart our friendship. Story 11. I went on 2 dates with a girl when I was in college. She was wonderful, but immediately wanted to be official and started drafting Instagram posts about us. She wanted to spend every day together and have sleepovers every night. It was so out of nowhere and we literally knew nothing about one another. I tried to look past it, but she asked me to be her first and I got uncomfortable. She seemed naive and I didn't want to take advantage. I suggested we take things slow and she took offense. I cut things off and her reaction was super childish. All of this in a 3-week period. Sweet girl, but the pacing was off. Story 12. Crush comes to my house. I explain how I'm slowly remodeling it and my plans for the house. She then starts telling me I shouldn't, and I should do it her way, and let her take it over and let her design, decorate, and do it all. The hell I will. Story 13. She told me that spanking her teenage daughter didn't work because it wasn't satisfying enough. A bit of context. This was a long time ago and far away in a European country. The mother was a statuesque blonde divorcee, and the daughter was about 14 and headed for trouble. Corporal punishment was de rigueur at the time, both here and in Europe. I decided that the situation was hopeless and noped out of there ASAP. The daughter hated her mother, big surprise, and went on to get pregnant and force her mother to raise the child. I came back to the States and still consider myself lucky to have dodged that bullet. Story 14. He talked about how he wanted to loosen up some boring family at a wedding reception, so he spiked their drinks with party drugs. Story 15. We were eating dinner out and he was rude to the server. Told him, we were pretty close friends, it would be nice to add a please or thank you. He said, why should I? She's a waitress, implying he feels superior, and I pay her to do her job. Instant turn off, and didn't really want to hang out with him even as friends after the incident. Story 16. He would steal people's tips off the bar counter when we were at a bar together with friends. Then he would offer to pay me food with it. No thank you. Story 17. Gave me a 5-minute lecture on conditions where cheating is okay. Story 18. A woman I was talking to was recently divorced and had moved back in with her parents. She already had a child and a couple of pets and was talking about getting another pet, and her parents told her no. She chose to go ahead and get another pet anyhow, and basically her parents began pushing her out the door. And it was a stressful situation for her, and I suggested she talk to her folks. However, once she told me she was grown and made her own decisions and did not care about their rules, I suddenly understood and quickly lost interest. Story 19. She generalized everyone. She was also such a B to everyone that she didn't understand. He plays video games? Wow, when do you think he'll move out of his parents' basement? Wow, she wears so much makeup, can you imagine what she's hiding under that face? Just a mean-spirited person, and it completely turned me off. Story 20. Coworker at work had such a beautiful energy, absolutely lovely to be around, always smiling at everyone, and she would laugh at my jokes, and she made some comments from time to time that made me feel validated and understood, which was very, very flattering, like she guessed my passions in life and told them to me, with a big smile while looking at me in the eyes, and I'm a reserved guy who doesn't share that stuff. All just very lovely. One day we're in the break room and she's talking to another guy the same way, and I'm consciously talking myself out of being jealous. Oh, you're not dating or anything. You don't even have her cell phone number. She's allowed to be lovely with other people. There's no reason to be jealous. Then when the guy leaves, she turns to the girl next to her and says, God, I hate that guy. And I had just been jealous that she was treating him exactly like she treats me. I still feel foolish when I think about it. Like, does she like me or hate me? Story 21. Had a harmless crush on a married friend that I did not signal or act on, ever. I've been the spurned wife before. I kept my distance and did everything short of unfriending him on Facebook. He slid into my DMs right after my separation became public knowledge, and he found out I was no longer married. He was still married to his wife, with a baby on the way. I didn't respond. They are divorced now. She's a really lovely person and deserves so much better. Story 22. First friend in college. She sat next to me in English class and we immediately clicked. One day she suggested we go out and study together for finals, and I didn't give it much thought. Turns out she liked me as much as I liked her, so you can imagine my reaction. It was what happened next that changed the mood. Orders a coffee, they make a small mistake and she flips out. Starts cursing at the cashier, demanding a full refund and an apology. I sit there confused. This is the same girl who looked shy and reserved when we first met. She walks out, I apologize profusely, and follow after her. She has the nerve to blame them, and I tell her it won't work out. The last week was awkward, to say the least. She refused to move seats or sit next to me if I moved, and acted like I was to blame for not taking her side. Like, no, you don't treat people like that. Story 23. Well, me and some mates went on a trip to Spain after our leaving cert. And there was this stunning-looking girl that got all the attention. The hotel set up a let's go get to know each other party with all sorts of drinking games, and later that night, when she was blatantly very, very drunk, she lifted her skirt and took a dump on the dancing stage. She instantly lost everyone's attention and was laughed off the street for the rest of the stay. Story 24. Not a crush, but next. Jiggled the door handle while I was taking a dump, and I got angry that I wouldn't let her in. Her, why can't I come in? Why are you not comfortable with me or something? We're dating. It had been 3 days. Story 25. I was having a party and the drinks were flowing. Went to check on her because she had disappeared for a while. As I open the door, I see her sitting on a small wastebasket taking a dump in my bedroom. I couldn't get that picture out of my head. I know I've done my fair share of dumb stuff, but still couldn't forget it. Story 26. I don't think this counts as immediately losing interest, for I actually needed some time to notice there were red flags all over the place. Guy I met in college, shared hobbies and tastes in music and movies. During this particular instance, when we had just started hanging out with each other's group of friends, I briefly mentioned in front of him and a couple of mutual friends that I had Googled this band he liked and listened to some of their songs. He deadass said that it was lame and I was trying to act like him. Skip to a few months later, he asked me out, took me on a date with his mom, called that same night to tell me we were going too fast and that we needed to take things slowly. 2 days later, said he needed time to think things through because he didn't want to hurt me. Found out the next day that he had been dating another girl the whole time. Ghosted him for a solid 3 days before he convinced me to talk things out. He said, quote unquote, that I was the girl he was destined to marry, but said he needed some experience first so that he wouldn't F things up with me. Ew. Story 27. My family is Jewish, and my grandfather survived the Holocaust. On the second date, he told me that he was a neo-Nazi, or at least on the path to becoming one. When I told him I was Jewish, and also politically very left, he told me that he wanted to F the commie out of me. Never spoke again. Story 28. Within the first 5 minutes of the date, he told me women shouldn't work in corporate America because they take too many bathroom breaks. He had come to this conclusion by parking himself outside of the ladies' room at his office for an entire afternoon. I said, "This date is over," stood up, and walked out. Story 29. She would eat butter, as in, grab a few sticks of butter and a small bowl of powdered sugar to dip it in. She'd eat it like Fun Dip. Story 30. Guy was academic, hygienic, and sweet. Treated waitstaff appropriately. Spoke formally but still funny. Shared things in common with me. Perfect gentleman. Date ended 10 out of 10. While driving me home, at a stoplight, I pointed to a homeless man crossing the street and said, I would stop my car for anybody crossing the street, just not homeless men. Where do they have to be? They're in no hurry. Me thinking, unsolicited and kinda odd. He added another comment. It'd be funny if I ran him over. Me. Ghosted him right after he dropped me off. Story 31. For context, him, 6'4", built dude. Me, 5 foot, non-built lady. We were hanging out at his house when he jokingly blocked my way when it was time for me to go and wouldn't let me pass. I asked him to let me by. When he wouldn't, I told him I was uncomfortable and he called me a crazy bee. That was the end of that for me. Story 32. Cute girl in 9th grade. There was a party over at her house, out in the country. Had a big old crush on her. So she says they raise chinchillas. Okay, everyone wants to see the fuzzy critters. There were about 100 of them. The ammonia smell was unreal. So there's a platform with battery cables on it, and I asked what that was for. She said, here, I'll show you. Have some ready to go anyway. She grabbed a little fuzzy critter, clamped the cables on it, and threw the switch. Without missing a beat, killed that critter. It was bizarre that a teenage girl would electrocute an animal that easily. No more crush. I was actually afraid of her a little after that. It kind of sucked the life out of the party, to say the least. Story 33. Tried to convert me to his religion. It's funny because his dad tried to do the same thing to my mom when they were teens. They've been friends for over 30 years and at some point were interested in each other. Needless to say that my mom lost interest in his dad because of the same reason too. Story 34. Called me a sexist for pointing out that she was improperly and dangerously using a power saw. I mean, I get a lot of guys probably talk down to women using tools, but for F's sake, she was so close to losing a hand or worse. In her defense, there was a guy there who had been constantly asking to take over what she was doing even when she was doing fine, so I'm sure she was pretty sick of it by then. There's definitely a lot of sexism towards women doing construction-related things. It was the disregard for personal safety that got me. Story 35. I rarely have crushes, but once, this girl I had a crush on in my class. We went to a bar/restaurant near our school with other classmates. Not only was she haughty with everyone, she kept giving death glares and talking in an inappropriate manner about the female waitress. I lost interest right after that night. Story 36. 2 days after our first date, she showed up at my work with a pan of homemade lasagna, an ice cream making machine for my kids, and all kinds of groceries. I was a single dad at the time, and I guess it was some sort of care package for me. I also work about 2 hours from where she lives. When I said she didn't have to do that, she started to cry. Bit of a red flag. Story 37. The most beautiful girl at my high school was friends with me. She invited me to her house one day, and when we were there, she became the angriest, meanest person in the effing world and was straight up awful to her little sister. I'm talking like 11 to 12 years old. She was verbally abusing the shiz out of her sister. After that, I started seeing her as kind of ugly, and she was legit beautiful. Not just the most attractive person at your school, I mean Gina Gershon beautiful, not beautiful beautiful. Story 38. Started dating a buddy who had the courage to ask her out first. Bro code. Also, this was high school, and those crazy kids made it. 12 years later, they're still together and married. Story 39. He was a dick to his daughter. Had this cute park ranger come into my work for help with application letters. One time he brought his very young daughter with him, and she was normally 4 to 5 years old, excitable, and he kept yelling at her. Not in a normal, stop doing that kind of way, but in a way that was clear he spoke to her like a delinquent teenager. She would be doing something mildly childlike like lifting herself up on the table, and he'd yell her to get down, quit fidgeting, shut up, and our area was very child-friendly. I gave her some crayons and coloring books and was glad to learn her mother had custody and she just had visitation. Story 40. Went on a date with a guy I met on OkCupid. He was cute. I was into him. It was all good. Then we got into the topic of our respective careers. I was writing erotica for a living at the time, which I told him pretty openly I might not put in front and center on my profile, but it wasn't like it was something I was ashamed about or anything. He laid his hand gently on mine across the table, looked me deep in the eye, and said, "Who hurt you?" I've never straight up laughed in a guy's face before then, but he absolutely refused to believe that I enjoyed writing about sex just because, rather than because I had been horrifically abused or whatever. There was no second date. Story 41. Women don't have any business serving in the military unless they all agree they're only allowed here for their looks and their Ah, the wonders of serving in the military. Makes you feel so well protected knowing douches like that are supposed to have your six. It was overheard and instantly made him go from cute dude in the base food court to not even worth a glance. Story 42. She shared a lollipop with her dog. Not eat some and give the dog the last of it. No, she'd suck on it for a while, then she'd hold it out for the dog to have a few licks, then she put it back into her mouth. Repeat. When I asked her about it, she said, dogs' mouths are cleaner than people's. Nope. He eats his own poop and licks his own butthole. No thanks.